Okay, all. We're here with John and Laura Grant, revisiting since our last conversation. So I wanted to reintroduce this awesome, inspiring duo. Hey, Laura, how are you? Hey, John, how are you?
Good.
Good, good.
Hi.
Hey, well, good to chat with you all again. I know this one's been a bit of a long time in the coming. It's amazing with your schedule of doing everything you're doing on your end, and part of the discussion today is going to be about that, how to manage all that, because you have more than a couple of things on your plate between the two of you. Yeah.
Right. I mean, keeps me busy.
Keeps you busy. Good stuff. How you doing, John? You feeling good?
How you
It's a
doing?
little,
Good, bad? Good.
it's a little bit early right now. I know. I got you up on a Saturday morning for this. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's good for us.
So what we're talking about today, if everyone hasn't heard, we've been looking to do a talk or a podcast slash webinar on caregiver self-care. This is such an important topic. Laura, you and I have been talking about this for some time now. You've actually engaged in aspects of caregiver self-care here at Apex. Um, I've been at this 20 years. We are forever speaking with people about taking care of themselves. So we put a few posts out through Facebook and Instagram, and the response was really quite overwhelming. I know I sent you the list of topics, Laura, and it's pretty overwhelming because there's a lot of people in this boat that feel uh, they shouldn't be doing things for themselves. There's all kinds of emotions we'll talk about, guilt and regret and things like that, always wanting to do more for the other person. But, let me know if you agree with this or not. But, we do have to grab the oxygen mask for ourselves, correct?
Right. I'm not the best at that, but I'm learning.
Good, good. Yeah, it's so important. I just finished writing an article yesterday for a local paper, and it started that way. We're told so often to take the oxygen mask for ourselves before we can help anybody else out. If the plane is going down, you have to be able to breathe and think rationally, if that's possible, in crisis moments like that, in order to take care of your loved ones, whether it be kids or someone with brain injury, dementia, etc. So there's lots of ways people are caregivers, whether they know it or not. In
Right.
situations like you all are going through, it's pretty clear. If somebody's had an injury, the caregiver accepts and assumes a certain role that now becomes a huge part of their identity, their makeup, their daily lives, etc. So can you, from a caregiver perspective, I've been there from having kids, and as a parent, you're a caregiver, but can you explain from a health caregiver standpoint, what your position is, what your role is, and just, kind of in a nutshell, as best you can, just talk about what that's like on a daily basis.
Sure. For me, I think that from the beginning, I remember exactly when he was in ICU, and I remember having given the diagnosis when they really didn't know. It was the unknown, right? And in that moment I did have a breakdown, but I knew that for John to go forward I had to be his voice, right? And that's where I kind of took it from, is that I knew that I had to put myself in his shoes and think about what would he want off of the relationship that we had before the accident, and thinking about just what his desires would be, right? And not thinking about myself in this. So kind of going from putting myself in his shoes. My role with him is, I am his voice because communication is the most challenging, but I manage daily, everything from getting him up. He's 100% dependent. If it wasn't, he would be in bed all day, to his medications, to his appointments, to his, the healthcare, to his insurance, to his, everything that we shared together in the household, I take care of now. So that's challenging, but the more and more he heals, the more and more, I'm sure I'm going to have him doing our checking account soon, right, John? He's there
Awesome.
right now.
Good, good, awesome. I love it. Now, I want to speak to something you said there. So, in you becoming his voice,
Right.
do you lose your own voice? Do you lose your identity? And I'm sure there's ups and downs in that, but can you speak to that? Because I know people that have voiced their concerns about that they don't feel they have their own voice anymore.
Yeah, that's challenging. I think for me, having more of a voice for him gave me more confidence in my own voice.
Right, right.
Um, I feel like one of the biggest the biggest keys there is listening to yourself. You know, when you have a voice for somebody else, so easily people have influences on what you say and what you do. And you have to accept what you internally feel, because you know that loved one the best. When you start following everybody else's recommendations and opinions, then you start losing yourself. When you're not true to what you know is right.
Right.
So for me, following that is key to keep myself content and keep myself grounded and at peace.
Right. And what can you speak to, because I'm sure this has happened the vast majority of time since 2017, where most of the conversations directed towards you are about John. How's John doing? How's his progress? He looks so great. All of this. So, you know, kind of speaking to that identity crisis that a lot of people are having, how would you recommend people deal with that? Because this is something we're hearing, that people don't ask about me anymore. People aren't asking how I'm doing. It's always about the other person. So can you speak to that a bit?
It's interesting because I'd rather talk about him than me.
Right.
That just might be who I am, right? That's a challenging one for people. You have to step away. I think it's a bigger aspect of having faith and surrendering and finding a connection for yourself on a deeper level to have that peace. When we live in a world that's so much about me,
Right.
but when you let go of that, that's when you can find that peace.
Okay.
But those that struggle with it, it's just, you got to surround yourself with people that, you know, hear you. And, you know, it's not like necessarily you're asking for help and stuff, but they know when you need help.
Right.
So kind of finding a community that people see you and they know that you're struggling and know to reach out and know those times that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you need that extra support.
Right. So to that leads to the, you know, the next, and probably in many cases, the most significant question, because this is what will lead to burnout and ultimate failure with any sort of caregiving relationship, is when do you ask for help and how do you ask for help? That is, you know, you have a small team around you. You have a large, big picture of providers and things like that. But, you know, your immediate team is quite small. Some have bigger ones, some have smaller ones. You know, how do you know when is the right time, and how do you ask for help without, you know, feeling like you're overstepping your boundaries with your loved ones, with your church groups, with anybody for that matter?
Right. Well, that's a tough one for me because I, like you said, I don't have a lot of close like people that I can count on. For me, I just, thankfully I have a mom that I can reach out and say, you know, I need a break. I usually can tell when I'm exhausted, when I can't feel like, when I wake up and I feel like I haven't had enough sleep. That's kind of like one of my biggest keys, when I can't keep my eyes open and it feels like I'm just getting, I guess when I start feeling like frustrated with everything and agitated with everything, I know that my brain's saying you've had enough and you need a little bit of rest. For me, getting outside is my go-to. You know, I don't necessarily need to get away for hours at a time. Sometimes just those little glimpses of getting outside and fresh air is, I feel like, all you need, and a little bit of breathing. But yeah, it's challenging to know and to have people to count on. So I sympathize with those people, because it is something that others people really don't understand if they're not going through it 24/7.
Right.
It is a very, very challenging thing. But again, I would just encourage finding your support system that's going to listen to you. And when remembering that how you feel, and even if you're mad or angry, those feelings are okay. Because I think a lot of times people are like, I shouldn't feel like this. This is, you know, this is selfish of me and stuff. It's not selfish of you. You need to go through it because it is a grieving period, and it is also a time of reflection, and your feelings and how your emotions react to this situation. You have to feel them. If you run from them, you're just digging them deeper, and you're going to have to address them at some point.
Right. And being we're talking about caregiver self-care and really more proactive versions of this, because most of it is highly reactive. Like you said, if you wake up and you're exhausted, you can't pull yourself out of bed, you know, time to ask for help. But probably at that point, it's too late, right? Because it's much more reactive versus proactive. So I like what you said, just taking whatever moments you can and getting out in the sun, hopping on the treadmill, whatever it is, on the in-betweens, when people are taking naps or when somebody else is there. But I think what happens is most people do wait to the point of exhaustion. So even if they have somebody to come in and unload them a little bit, now it's about just, just conking out, taking a nap and doing whatever, rather than, and that's taking care of yourself. But again, it's very damage control oriented versus proactive. So can you speak to that, about how can caregivers, particularly ones that are maybe not, blessed with the significant internal drive that someone like you may have, thrust into these situations? We will all develop drive to persevere, but folks like you had that before this, so it just naturally helped the process. What can people do before the stuff hits the fan, so to speak, before the burnout, before the exhaustion?
I think, the tools for healing that you support John with, I try to use for myself as well. But also, one of the biggest things that I had to learn was the moments that I not step away, but the moments that I don't, John's going to be okay. If we don't get to everything, if we don't do all the therapies, if we don't, if I can't be perfect. And I think as a caregiver, sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves, like we need to do this therapy, we need to do that therapy, we need to go here, we need to go there. I think sometimes less is more, and realizing that they're going to be okay and they're actually going to be better if you're better, right? And so being proactive in yourself, finding time to do brain training, do the activities with them, not all about them. Because I find with John, when we do these activities together, like the power play, we both stand on the vibration together. It's fun because it's interaction, and that is such a healing tool for our love connection as well. So I think from the beginning, what I would recommend for people is stepping into, yes, you're healing them, but you're also healing yourself in this new environment. So stepping in and asking, how, just like if they go to Apex, say, okay, can I have some hours, working with you to just see where I am, and just be proactive on that level to keep yourself. Because one thing somebody told me that I think is really important is when somebody goes through a traumatic situation like John, I'm internalizing, I'm going through the process just as much as he is. I might be able to cope with it differently, but I am internalizing it as well. So I need to heal as well. So knowing that and being proactive on that, I think, is important.
Right. And that's one thing we've seen, particularly in the brain injury world, but this really can transfer to any other world, is stepping into those activities with the other individual. It's like, as a parent, parents, will complain about having to drive their kids to soccer practice every day. Well, stepping into that role and, getting on the field with them and playing, that game with them. You might not be the coach or whatever, you certainly could be in many cases, but now you're getting the exercise, you're getting the social interaction, the connection, all of that. So stepping into that role could be huge, be it parenting, dementia, brain injury, et cetera.
Yeah. Yes, it's actually really fun because we do like figure eights. We sit there and count. Like before we started this, remember you asked us to count for a recording, and that's just what we do. We do it together, and actually it's giving John more of a voice more than anything else, right?
Right.
So we've been having so much fun recently. Ever since you've given me activities, they're so in line with John's that like even my eye gaze, he does it, then I do it, and we both count together. And that's so it's not all, because I think for somebody that is in this situation, it's tough for him because he feels like it's all about him all the time, and on some level he wants it to be about me too.
Right. Good. So what are some examples you talked about? So I know we're familiar with things that you're all doing at home, but what are you doing that you can interact with one another? Some specific things.
Right. First off, just even basic exercises like leg exercises, like I'll sit next to him and do them with him so he can see me, like mirror exercising, because we know the mirror neurons are so important. We're doing the eye gaze exercises that you give us. We're doing the metronome, the interactive metronome together. We're getting on the vibration together. We're tossing balls together. Just anything that we can. Even like if we're playing like cognitive games on the iPad, I try to play them too. I need them too.
Don't we all?
I know, right? I can't get enough. And the lasers, just even taking those, we take them in the car sometimes and he'll laser, and then I'll maybe laser myself a little bit, or, you know, anything like that. I feel like any of the tools that you guys get, not only for somebody that is healing, but somebody that is healthy, that needs to stay healthy.
Right. Good. And for, you know, for the listeners, there's many things that we're talking about that you may or may not be familiar with. And, you know, that's some conversation for another day. But when we're talking about lasers and interactive metronome, these are tools that we utilize in practice that can be, you know, that can be translated into home use. And we can certainly provide information to people that are interested there. But there's also a host of you know, basic activities, you know, moving and eating and thinking and breathing, you know, just sitting and breathing with one another, doing basic breathing exercises, things that are very accessible, free of charge, eating well together. That's another process where, you know, both people can be invested in the process and contribute to it. We all need to eat, you know, so we might as well make it an interactive kind of habit. Moving, you know, walking together, those kinds of things. So yeah, thank you so much for that. And also too, Resimax is the sponsor of this episode, so that's a brilliant tool as well. Very cost-effective tool that people can use together at home. And you can go back to the intro and hear a little bit more about that tool.
I love that. We actually are funny because we use it. We both have, you know, jaw issues, and because we've been grinding a little bit. But we both put them in because we have two of them, and I put mine in and he puts his in, and we sit there and just like look cute. One time we were in the car, I'm sure people are looking like,
yeah,
those two doing in there.
We've got all kinds of stories about tools that we give to people, and they're using them either driving when they shouldn't be, and other places. And yeah. But yeah, the Resimax is a phenomenal tool, especially for that stress reduction, you know, bringing down the anxieties. And, you know, just like certain realms of neurofeedback, for example, something that we do in office, there's realms of neurofeedback now that are fairly experimental, but they're looking at doing neurofeedback on couples together, parents and children together, because they're finding certain brainwave similarities or parallels. And if one person's brainwaves are way up here and the other one's way down here, there's going to be a lot of conflict and strife and you know, kind of discord. Whereas if these people can get literally on the same wavelength through certain types of training, now everything becomes easier, more proactive, more loving, more, you know, just better, really.
We need to have a podcast on that, because I could say so much about that as far as healing him and the love energy. And, you know, I found that when he was even in the hospital bed, I would sit there, and this is, you know, for caregivers and stuff out there, don't forget that connection, because that person's still who they are.
Right.
Like for me, he couldn't talk for 2 years, but I would lay in bed with him at a time, like at 11 o'clock every day. I would go and lay in the hospital bed with him, and he could count on that. And it was like his safety, and we'd hold hands and like put our heads next to each other. And I feel like I could feel those vibrations between our two heads, you know, that energy. And it was that actually grounded me as well, that I just stopped everything, all the do's I needed to do, and all that sometimes, and just do what I know that I would want in that situation.
Right. Cool. And it is awesome too, that this day and age, 21st century, we can actually measure concepts like people being on the same wavelength. So that is pretty cool. And you'll see just, you know, how people are much more productive in therapy one day versus the other. It's because of where their, you know, their kind of brain electrical energy is at that particular day. And we certainly see when it meets or matches with the caregivers, that's when things really explode as far as growth goes. That's awesome.
We love it.
Awesome. So this is a big one. We have just a list, which we're not going to be able to get to all of these questions. So many of the listeners are going to recognize their questions either directly or indirectly, but I'm going to start going through the list a little bit here and just, you know, a couple of, you know, gems or you know, tidbits of advice you can offer if able on some of these. This is a big one. And I know you went through, this was prior to us seeing you all, but I know there was a period of aggression, you know, right? And when people are out in public, whether it's a child with autism or somebody who has brain injury or somebody with dementia or kids, there's going to be situations that people are in where it's quote unquote embarrassing. You know, people feel like what do they do? This person's acting up and now they're getting nervous. Everybody's watching. You know, how do you stay calm in the face of this agitation or aggression, particularly in public settings? Because this can be very, you know, people do start thinking of themselves in those moments, and how can they deal with that?
Well, that's a tough one. On many different levels. I have more respect for people with those situations. Now, I can honestly say before, I didn't fully understand how the brain is. You think, oh, it's just a behavioral thing, but no, it's not. It's usually a brain thing, right, going on and misfiring. So I have a whole new respect for that. So I know for the people looking in that don't have a loved one like that, yeah, it's tough. But honestly, you have to just let go of that, because those people don't really know what's going on. And they can have their own judgments, but at the end of the day, what is really going on. For us, we were very blessed that people were very compassionate about it and tried to help. I tried to stay calm instead of fighting it, like you were talking about energy. The more that he was raised up, and if I got, oh my gosh, and I started panicking, it was just going to make him more. So I just tried to stay calm and showed him love, that, and tried to, in those situations. But yeah, I think that if you just, I usually say, we have a traumatic brain injury or something, usually people are pretty compassionate, and then they want to help out as well.
Right.
So I think if you just go into it knowing that other people have your best interest at heart, and just realize that those that understand will understand, and those that don't, then that's their own experiences in life.
Right. Yeah, there is a lot of, when people don't know, it's that projection of fear or worry or anxiety on their end. But, you hit the nail on the head, and it's certainly easier said than done, but it's just not letting that get to you. Everybody has their own issues to deal with. But when people are on the spot like that, what happens is their fight or flight responses kick in. They may get embarrassed for the behavior or angry at the behavior. And what happens then, they have the fight or flight response, and they shut off their front brain, and they can no longer make sound decisions. So it's a spiral after that. And this goes back to what we were just talking about, kind of, wavelengths. One is way up here, and the other, if it stays down here, the one that's up here can start to come down and calm down a little bit, just like a parent and a child. If the parent meets force with force, nothing good is going to happen. Yeah.
Just gets, and I see that a lot, nothing against the healthcare and stuff, but a lot of times in those situations, we would, I know one time in particular, we went to the VA, and John this is when he was pretty agitated. There was a lot of health issues going on looking back, but he was very, very agitated. And I just, I'm like, just stay calm. And I just stay in there and show him love, and, realize that he's just, it's the process of healing. And so many people came in and just made more fear for him. And it was just making him go up and up. And I'm like, everyone leave the room. You have to. But as a caregiver, know that it's okay to tell people to get out, right. Because you're with that loved one 24/7. Most everyone is, and know that it's okay to tell people enough. Right. And yeah.
That's a huge point right there. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, absolutely. Using your voice, and particularly to diffuse a potentially volatile situation. Right. To that end, too, being able to maintain that level of calm is very, very difficult for people to do. You've had years to practice this. You also had years of, Pilates practice and other things that helped ground you a bit more effectively. So, if you could speak to, and I could speak to some basic techniques, I'll talk about what we call tactical breathing, just a basic, simple intervention. If things are just starting to escalate for whatever the reason may be, somebody coming in the room while you're at a doctor's visit and they're ramping up emotions, once that person does step out of the room, it's okay. Now, what I need to do is as a caregiver, I need to go ahead and just do something to diffuse that sympathetic response or that fight or flight response that's already kicked into gear before things really get out of control. And the best way to do that is our breath. So tactical breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds. So in through the nose, hold, and then out. That right there is used by military, is used by police, is used by public speakers, people going into potentially aggressive, hostile, anxiety-provoking situations. And what it does is it initiates an immediate relaxation response to start to shut down the fight or flight response. So that's something that people can do right there. And then that practiced over time will help you be a little bit more cool headed, level headed, as opposed to just going into, just going into fear, anxiety, worry mode. Do you have any kind of tips or tricks on your end, as opposed to just, trying to remain cool and level headed, but actual techniques that you might use that will help ground you if you're getting a little bit out of control?
I think so. One in particular, and this is, I mean, on the standpoint of health and taking care of yourself, I find a lot of times, people that are high strung or, have that higher wavelength and just feel like they get agitated really quickly and they can't find that grounding, is examine kind of what is your self practice for yourself. A lot of times I see people that, are high strung and then they end up going into, like, let's say a fitness regiment that's high intensity and high music and we talked about this, like me running on the treadmill makes me agitated, right? Sometimes it's frustrating.
Right.
If I go outside and it's more for that calming. It's finding that, that balance. If you're going to go to a high intensity, you go in and people are yelling at you and or the music's really loud, that's not helping you. You're thinking your self-care by working out, but you're actually keeping yourself riled up, right? So finding the balance in your self-care of how to bring yourself down. So a lot more meditation. For me, when he was in the hospital, child's pose was my best friend. When I would go to a yoga class, sometimes they would be like, can you get out of child's pose? I was like, no, I need to just sit there and breathe. Right. Because just sitting there and just closing my eyes and being in a position where I could just let everything out was so key for me. Right. So I think finding that life is so much go, go, go these days, that the best thing you can do as a caregiver is find something to slow you down and shut your mind down. Maybe reading a book or journaling or breathing, not necessarily going to a high intensity class and where there's so much chatter and, you just not putting more overload into you. Right.
So Metallica in a spin class before a doctor's appointment, not a good idea.
I didn't say so, right? It just, because you're wounding yourself up. But I mean, there's places for that. There's good, good for it all. But especially in this situation, I find when there is agitation or if there is, something that it seems like your world is always spinning out of control, or to slow down, just find slowness and mindfulness.
And I think too, people understanding it's no one episode, no one game, no one anything. Just look at any big professional sporting event. If somebody's at Wimbledon playing tennis or the Super Bowl, playing quarterback, that game is not won on that particular field. That game is won in all of the practice leading up to that point in time. So the better prepared somebody is before, the better they're going to be in that situation, period. It's just the way it goes. So we need to train our brain, prepare our brain over time to be less reactive, because if we're constantly doing it on the spot, it's never going to work. It's going to lead to burnout. There's just going to be perpetual problems with that. So if I could get one thing across to the listeners at this point, it's you have to practice every day for that big game. Yeah.
I got to tell you one thing that John taught me, because there's a lot of things that looking back, John was my grounder because I'm hyper, and there's one thing that he always told me is, expectation management and also not reacting. He was really good at, in a situation when something happened, to step away and actually observe it. And I found that helped me a lot in the healthcare system when I was given information and it was like, you need to make a decision right here, right now. And I've had, people that I've actually had one lady that gave me something and she said, it's okay if you're mad. And I'm like, I'm not going to get mad right now. Let me sit with it and come back to you. And knowing that that's okay, because, in the health, there was a lot of times they're like, you need to make a decision right now or this or that. And sometimes know that you can take a little time for yourself to think about it and rationalize it, because we are in this, when you are caring for somebody, you are in this, hyper, everything's going, that sometimes stepping away and making a decision is a little bit easier and just silence, right? To hear what you need to do.
Right. And that's a huge right brain exercise, being able to step back, survey, look at the big picture, look at the forest instead of the trees, because everybody gets, particularly in those moments, they get so hung up in the details that right brain, particularly if they have tendency towards anxiety, ADD, ADHD, OCD, the right brain isn't working at its greatest capacity to begin with. So they will get hung up in the details. They will get tend to lean more towards that overreact versus step back. So that's just great. Exercising that stepping back capacity is incredible.
Yeah. That was a big one for me, because you need to, especially with someone with a traumatic brain injury, there's so many components to it.
Right.
That you need to kind of, because the person that's giving you the information, they're trying to do their best out of their lens, but they don't know everything that's happening every second of the day, and you do as a caregiver. So
Right.
look at the big picture and know that your questions, asking questions and thinking forward, as far as, is this really what we need to be doing? So, yeah.
Perfect. So how about this? This is something that comes up quite a bit. When people are thrust into caregiver roles, there's significant burden to the fiber of the family unit, but also too from the financial end of things. Generally, somebody who was a breadwinner is now not working anymore. So there's the financial end of things. How does one, and this relates incredibly to, is very relevant when it comes to self-care, because if people are dealing with financial challenges and struggles every day, that just adds to the stress where people can't serve that caregiver role to the best of their abilities. So what can people do to deal with the financial burden that is thrust upon them? You've been there, everybody's been there that is in this role. Again, even if I'll say just raising kids, it's, I've been there. You're not just raising kids, you're taking on a lot. So what can people do to help kind of cushion that blow and handle those stressful situations so they can be a better caregiver?
That's a tough one. Save and, save for the future of what's going on. I would say, like, a lot of people ask how we do all the things that we're doing. And honestly, it comes down to, you can't put a price tag on somebody's health and well-being. For me currently, are you leaving me? Bye.
You're going to come back, John?
He's keeping his iPad.
I'll see you in a bit.
For me, I've just put on hold a lot of things that I've wanted to do personally, as far as, like, there's a lot of renovations I want to do in my house. I want to do my backyard, like those kind of things. Just looking at okay, we could get all these things in our backyard. We could do all this, but if we're not healthy, how are we going to enjoy it? So just putting health first. I think that's number one. And also realizing that, if you believe in God and the higher being, that that things will be put in place for you, that He will provide. And then also asking, there's a lot of people out there that want to help, and knowing that asking for help that's an okay thing to do. Right. And admitting that, you need help.
And that, kind of lends itself towards the crowdfunding. So many people, we're finding, just to, to help people out there. Some people are not wanting to put themselves in those situations, but people love knowing that they're helping a good cause or a good story, so to speak. And the fact is, if people are willing to step outside their comfort zone and ask for help, amazing things will happen. We've seen it time and time again with patients of ours that have done that through, GoFundMe or You Caring or any of these other websites. Some of them are so super saturated now that it's really hard for people to get, significant amounts of income there. But we found more recently, if you can be as specific as possible on your ask, then you will generally get what it is you want help with. So people say, we need a gym membership for somebody. That's going to be $200. Usually they'll get that paid for. If they have a piece of equipment, we want a low-level laser for this person to help them recover for their brain injury. Next thing you know, they have that exact amount of money in 2 or 3 weeks in that account. So, and I know you all
out there is saying, hey, we need this to help, hopefully as we all work through this and bring awareness, hopefully the healthcare will help more. But until then, I think people are finding that, these things are working. And then the more people know about these, the more they become available.
Right. And also too, like you said, just, foregoing certain expenses, foregoing certain wants, and then focusing on the needs.
Yes.
Because obviously that latte every day is $150 at the end of the month or something like that. So you look at the savings over the course of a year, what you could do with that. So I think it's prioritizing, organization, all of that. So I appreciate your tips there.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, and I get that from my dad, the engineer. His brain makes me,
That's it. That left brain.
I know. Thanks, Dad.
All right. How about this one? This is one that came up in different ways, but came up recurrently from from what the public was asking on this. How do I deal with my own emotional trauma suffered as a result of what you're going through, what somebody else is going through? Because naturally the caregiver is dealt a significant emotional blow with whatever it is, even again if it's parenting, because you go through this incredible trauma that your brain can't even remember years later because you were just in survival mode for so long. So how do you deal with the emotional trauma?
Number one is not running from it, and also being okay feeling it. Because I find that if you run from it and say, oh, I'm fine, and just tuck it down deeper, at some point it's going to come up. Right. So that's number one, is it's okay for whatever you feel. Feel it, sit in it. And the other thing for me, my biggest thing that has helped me is talk therapy is not the answer for me. I mean, yes, I love to talk, as we all know, but talking back through and trying to rationalize it and make logic of it. And sometimes I just put myself back into spiraling back into it. For me, working on more of a trauma level in the brain of processing things that haven't really fully been processed, going into the neurological part of it and learning how the brain handles and what the responses are in the body is key. With the eye gaze and just kind of retraining those deeper level on the cellular level, I think has really helped me more than anything, because then I'm able to process things and I'm able to, I feel like when my brain was chaotic, you could see it, my eyes couldn't focus, my eyes couldn't go, they couldn't process things. I couldn't, so everything that was coming in, every emotion, I couldn't feel it. So for me, I find like we're doing the neuro-emotional technique, a lot of energy healing. And when I say energy healing, that's more just looking on a bigger picture of positivity, of moving forward and surrendering and letting go and understanding that energy in life, where we are all part of, we all have energy, and just kind of looking at things as like, I can't control everything, letting go of control is huge, because that's coming from fear.
Okay.
So I know I'm going in a circle with that. It's not really, but I really think taking care of your own brain is going to help on so many levels with dealing with the trauma.
Right. Absolutely. And so glad that you came to that awareness where you really started to deal with your, underlying neurological underpinnings, if you will, because just like a brain injury, if somebody has pre-existing problems with attention, focus, impulse control, obsessive, thoughts, compulsive behaviors, the brain injury just makes that worse. So essentially your brain has suffered a brain injury as a result of all this, because of the psychological trauma, the cellular processes that occur, which really just ramps up, pre-existing challenges you may have had. And this is really important for caregivers to understand that, yes, exercise, breathing, all of this is really important, but there's a certain value for those that are able to, really engage in this correction of faulty eye movements, correction of certain, motor timing imbalances, balance and vestibular functions, even, postural muscle discrepancies, hemispheric imbalances, these things that can be looked at by trained individuals, typically in the functional neurology world, and oftentimes can be relatively quick fixes, so to speak, to really help that person along their path, because they may have barriers to improvement in this emotional distress because of underlying neurological organization challenges or struggles. So that's great.
And I think this goes into a part about, gosh, I just lost my train of thought. So sorry.
It's Saturday morning.
I mean, come on. What was that part that I was going into? Oh, immune system, immunity. Especially I find for myself, I've had more colds than I've ever had in the past not recently colds, but I mean allergies, and just understanding how that so much played with our stress levels. And when I started doing the stuff with you, I mean, like my nasal stuff has cleared up, and I feel like my body's can fight it. Before, I just felt like, when I was in the hospital setting, I felt like every time I touched something, it was like I was getting sick. And that was just, my body was tired. My body was exhausted. And I've seen a lot of times that people get sick, like really sick. Yeah. And the last thing we need is for me to be sick, because if I'm sick, I can't take care of John, right? So understanding that's all parallel to what we're saying about the eyes and the function of the brain, it all intertwines.
Absolutely. And you really hit the nail on the head, dealing with the neurological component, because, neuroimmunology, neuroimmunity, there's absolute connections between the brain, the immune system, the gut, et cetera. But it's not as simple as just taking a supplement to make your immune system better. You have to look at this from a neurological perspective, decreasing stressors on the system. And then, yes, all that other stuff can be effective. Look at what we're going through now with this, the COVID-19 coronavirus, the fear and worry around this. And it's not that this shouldn't be taken seriously, it very well should, but the fear and worry around this virus is far more damaging, in my humble opinion, than the actual virus itself, because it's weakening people's immune systems. There's research, there's studies that show, negative emotions like that will decrease antibody production, will decrease certain types of, white blood cells. And then, the more positive aspect, the gratitude, thankfulness, things like that will actually elevate those things. So we really need to reframe the mind on a solid neurological foundation by addressing some of these, hemispheric or neurological imbalances.
Yeah. Right. It's so important. And even on the level of, as John was healing, keeping negativity away and trying to stay positive in my own self, and, being thankful each day he's alive, and, each little step in recovery is a step forward, and knowing that there's no quick fix in life in any direction. There's nothing in life that is quick fix. And it's through that journey and the hardship we grow as a person as well.
So a lot of these themes keep coming back again, all the practice before the big game, so to speak. It's lifetime process. There's no one thing, one technique, one trick that's going to make somebody better at something. It's just not going to happen. I do think, though, what you spoke to, the more people can practice being okay with it, or be okay feeling that trauma, is a massive first step, and that can create great change, because the fact is, guilt is probably the number one emotion. I need to put my stuff aside and deal with this person. But no, it's, you need to be okay feeling those things you're feeling in order to get any level of improvement, but also to take better care of the person that you're in fact taking care of.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. So we kind of spoke to this a little bit, but where do you find we talked about techniques, the NET, neuroemotional work that you're doing, but where do you find emotional support? I mean, clearly with John, but can you speak to that a little bit? Where do you find that?
Mine is my faith. I mean, that's my number one, because I know that nobody on an earthly level can give me that peace and that feeling of, love that I really need, right? Because it's burnout. A lot of people, as a caregiver, when people come in to help, they get burned out pretty quickly. And you're like, well, wait, I'm doing this every day, and you can't even do one day, right? And so there is that guilt, or that, like, what? Like, how am I, and that just brings you down. But just knowing that everything in life is for our better being. We're all growing. No one day we're going to be the same person as we were the day before. And just, I feel like on a bigger level, to deal with something like this as a caregiver, you've got to check in with your heart and your soul. And it goes back to the mindfulness and finding those practices that work for you. You've got to connect deeper with yourself. You actually have to go internally,
right,
to be okay with all this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you spoke to that mindfulness, because that's an area where people, there's people that have strong faith and others that don't, particularly in the face of adversity, trauma, et cetera. A lot of people lose their faith because they say, why did this happen? Some people go further into their faith with trauma. Other people, dissociate or detach altogether from it. So I think really whatever path anybody is on at any given time, they have aspects to connect with something greater than themselves, be it their faith, be it mindfulness, be it nature, be, anything. Yeah. No, that's huge. Thank you.
And one of the biggest things is stepping away from what was to what is. That is I think a key thing. You know, I miss that person. I wish they were like that. I want them to be fully healed. Letting go of those thought patterns and those continually saying those little phrases.
Yeah.
Instead saying, I'm thankful they're here, or we're healing. We're, this positive, like we've talked about. It's just that positive talk in your head. It's a training. You have to train yourself to do it. Write it on the refrigerator, write it by where you brush your teeth. Just kind of, you can train your brain in positivity. But if you're sitting going, I miss that person, or I wish that this didn't happen, or you're just going to keep spiraling downward.
Right. No, that's huge. And that's probably, I would imagine, one of the single most important takeaways from today is that not getting stuck in those old patterns, because we're never the same as we were the day before, regardless of trauma or anything like that. And if we're ever expecting to get back to that place, we're only setting ourselves up for failure. And in fact, some people, we see it with the addictions population all the time. When people have remained sober for certain periods of time, their brains are actually stronger and better than they ever were before. And we're seeing that in certain types of brain injury as well. So they're going to be different. In many cases, they're going to be better. So that, keeping that in mind, like you said, versus that self-talk that can really be defeating is critically important.
I have one thing to say is, as a caregiver, going back to the guilt, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, I should have done this, I should have done that, or what should I be doing? What are all the things? And I tell people a lot of times, what you're doing in the moment is exactly what you need to be doing, and you're doing the best that you can with what you're provided.
Right.
And never beat yourself up, because I think that there's that constant like, oh, I should have done that, or man, if I had done that at the beginning, or like even with John, I wish I had functional neurologist in earlier. Well, yes, I do, but I can't go back and change it, and know that I was doing the best with what I knew at that moment. Right? Sometimes we're not going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. And there's going to be step backs and step forwards. But knowing that with the lens that you are looking through, you're doing the best that you can.
Good. And I appreciate you saying that, because coming from us, oftentimes people may take it as, all right, well, even though they see this every day, they don't know because they haven't been through it. Everybody's been through their own path. But coming from you, someone who is in it every day, that is, it's incredible, because that was the number one question that people were asking, is that, am I doing, excuse me, am I doing the best? Am I doing enough? Are there better things out there? Those questions will come up, but yes, you are always doing the best you can in that moment. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like when you open yourself and you let go and allow things to happen, that's when the other things come through.
Cool. So I know we've got, we're coming up on time here in a little bit. We can certainly do it part 2, part 3, part 10.
That's right.
This is, and I know once this airs, we're going to have a lot more questions.
Right.
But I think one thing that's really important is, and you're a master at this, is how, to decrease stress on the overall caregiving process, to help all this other stuff we've talked about. How do you establish a daily routine or organize everything you have to do? Because that is by far one of the biggest, if not the biggest, stressors that people face is, what do I do from this time in the morning till this time at night to maximize my efforts, decrease my stressors, especially for somebody who may not be very organizationally driven? How do you organize your life with John?
I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how I do it. Learning to say no is huge. Learning that you don't have to do everything is another thing. There for a while, we were going to way too many appointments in one day, and it was so stepping back. Sometimes less is more. And then also just kind of like focusing on the moment. What does that person need in that moment? And then what do you need in that moment? Right? If you need to sit down for a second and take a breather, do that. But don't feel like you have to stay on a routine and it can't change. Be open for change through the day.
Right.
I mean, we've had moments, I know that John had one of his biggest shifts in agitation, when one day we had scheduled, I think like we had to go to the VA and go to somewhere else. And in that day he just didn't feel good. And at that moment we were having a hard time going to the bathroom and stuff. And I just canceled everything. And I said, we're going to sit here in this moment and let you feel safe and comfortable, because you got to remember, this person is a person too. And even if they can't say, hey, I don't want to do anything today, sometimes you need to be able to recognize that. And so we just canceled everything and stayed home. And in that moment of, it's like he felt like he was heard, that he took a leap forward, right? Instead of doing all the things that you would think that were going to heal him or help him. I said no. The best thing he needed was just to sit still at home.
Yeah. And we've talked about that quite a bit. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like going to the gym. You know, you can't go to the gym for 30 days straight and expect to see gains. You have to have periods of rest and, you know, reset and integration, or however you want to look at it. And, you know, I have people look at me cross sometimes when they're doing so much, and I just tell them, don't do anything this weekend. And they look at me like, what? You know, why would we need to be doing something all the time? It's like, no, you don't. We don't want them to get in the habit of doing nothing all the time, but there clearly needs to be downtime. And again, just know that you're doing enough. There are, you know, with apps and all kinds of things, there's a way to organize daily plans and exercises. You guys have, you know, countless things you do. And for some people, we'll just have them list the days of the week on a whiteboard and all the exercises and just start checking things off. And that's, you know, for people that are inclined to do that kind of thing, it's a great organizational tip. But yes, not overdoing it, because that's what we find in many cases, where people are doing way too much.
I feel like during the day, to fit in some of these things, we just incorporate them in our daily living, you know, for standing or walking. So if I go and we have to go get dressed or something, I get them up and we walk out to the chair. You know, just, it doesn't have to be, okay, now for an hour we're going to do rehab. I just incorporate it into our daily thing. We stand up to brush our teeth, you know, so he's getting weight bearing there, you know, just finding it in those kind of ways, making patterns. Like first thing when we get up, we go downstairs and we do our eye movements to start our day. It takes us 2 minutes. That's what we do. And then we brush our teeth, and then we hum or something, you know, just interacting through the day like that, rather than feeling like it has to be 3 hours straight of therapy, right? And then we're done for the day. Then you're worn yourself out.
Right. Good. Okay. Like I said, we could just, you know, I'm just going to ask you one question, and I think I know the answer, or at least, you know, one of two things. What drives you to keep going?
Knowing that my purpose on earth, and how John and I were brought together for this bigger purpose, and our purpose is to help educate others and bring awareness and hope, and that the story is much bigger than us. That's what drives me. Right. Yeah, and his love. You know, we have this connection that I know he would do this for me. I'm not sure if he would do everything I would do. He's amazing. We don't think the same as women.
If we could get him off the iPad, no.
I know.
Hey,
he's just ready to go do things. That's the thing. He's ready to go walk, kick the ball. But
24/7.
Oh gosh, yes. But he is getting better at resting some. But I think that's the number one, and knowing, not necessarily saying forgetting about myself, but realizing that it's not all about me, right? And that life is not all about me, that I'm here for a bigger purpose, and following my gifts, following my my drive and my gut feeling of what I need to share. That plays a big role in keep going forward.
Right. Yeah. And it clearly comes through in how you share your story. You know, what an amazing journey, but, you know, you can see the meshing of the love, the hope, the connection, the overall bigger picture, helping others. You know, I really, as many do, admire you all for how you're going about sharing this story, because it is helping so many. And it's you know, it's a resource that can be found nowhere else. And it is, again, based in the purest of intentions. And that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've had many reach out to me, and, you know, in the times that you're in the ER or ICU and having those videos and kind of seeing some of the darkest moments, it helps, you know, people bring to light, okay, this is kind of normal, even though it's not normal when you're there. You're like, whoa, but it is normal. Everything, you know, there's a purpose to it. So.
Right. Understood. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think you'll be happy to know we moved into the new office, so you'll see that when you come down next. But we are, with all of this we've been talking about, we had one room that we're calling it the garage right now, because everything is just shoved in there, and we don't know where to put it. But we're currently building it out as a caregiver lounge. So what we're doing is we're going to have massage chairs in there and all kinds of stuff. Just, the Muse, you name it, all different things for the ResiMax tools for people to go in and just unplug themselves. Well, we've got their people, because even when people come in, the caregivers are, they're with their people 24/7, every step of the way, every room. And we really like to develop that relationship rapport with the individuals where they, as you, begin to feel comfortable just letting us do our thing with them. And
Right.
and there's a huge power in that, allowing them to separate. So, this just came to us. We need to have a room for the caregivers themselves just to go in and just kind of detach. And some people may choose to come through the whole program. If not, at least they've got a room to go to and do their thing while their others are here. So,
I'm going to bring some stuff and we're in that room.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see. Any parting thoughts? Do you have, this was, initially started as a kind of a brain tip podcast, 365 days of the year doing something positive for your brain. But do you have one kind of brain health tip or one caregiver tip or de-stress tip or something that, you do, that you use, that can just really just kind of help, give you a state change, get you kind of prepped for that game, so to speak, when things are a little bit more on high alert? Do you have one kind of cool tip, tool, or trick you want to share?
Tip, tool, or trick? I find journaling to be really, really beneficial.
Awesome.
And yes. And also documenting, so you can go back and see how far you've come.
Right.
It's been very helpful for me. Because sometimes when you're doing it every day, you just kind of get lost in not seeing the bigger picture, because it is usually healing that's purposeful and healing that's going to be long-term.
Right.
It takes time.
Yeah, that's huge. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I never thought, platforms like Instagram would be utilized as a clinical resource. And the fact is, we have folks coming to us all the time where we can document we can see their documented journey before we even get to know them. And that paints a clinical picture that we simply cannot get through paperwork or anything like that, or even examination. So that is something that I'm really fully embracing now, as much as I wanted to kind of distance from that. Really recommending to people, not that they have to put themselves out on social media, but constantly taking pictures, constantly taking video, because when you get caught up in it, it's, the frog in the pot of water kind of thing. If that heat turns up over time, the frog doesn't make it out alive. We kind of boil, ourselves to death, so to speak, when we're in it all the time. When we can step back and say, wow, that's where we were 6 months ago, or even 6 weeks ago. That's where we can start to develop more of those positive emotions and not feel, like these positive thoughts and all are contrived. They're real. They're very, very real. Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Thing that I think about as you're saying all that with the documenting is expectation management. Like I've talked about, that John always told me, the idea of I want full healing. I want full healing. I hear that a whole lot. I want them to be who they were, or, in any situation. And I think sometimes you have to let go of that in place, right? And I remember when Dr. Daigle came along and he asked me like the goals for John, and all I said was his quality of life. Yep. That's really, and we all want, when somebody happens like this, you want them to fully heal, but sometimes we got to step back and say, they're perfect like they are right here and right now. And that energy of telling somebody and giving them that acceptance, right, and they're going to sense the energy of the caregiver. If the caregiver, all they want is for them to be who they were, that right, caregiver, that loved one's going to feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that goes to too, raising children. Do we ever expect we're going to have, a 20-year-old be the same 2-year-old that we remember? No, because there's so much growth and expectation and all of that. But if we constantly want them to be a certain way, then they will not grow. They will not excel. They will not achieve. We're clearly seeing that in some aspects of the, the psychological literature and parenting techniques. But yeah, people are in general, can be much more effective, better, et cetera, after even profound brain injuries. We had a perfect example. We had a fellow come in, was always very kind of angry and cynical. And the family had said to us, the silver lining in all of this is he is just the happiest, most loving, caring person on the planet after this injury. And it's not saying he's better than he was before, but what happens now, they are a much closer family now as a result, not just because of the injury, but because of the whole change in his demeanor, his attitude. So,
Right.
technically speaking, things are much better for them.
Right.
So, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
You just kind of take it in that kind of way. There's sometimes tragedy or suffering can bring you further apart or closer together.
That's it. That's it.
And there's always a lesson in everything. We're trying to grow for a better being.
Right.
And that's the journey of life.
Awesome. Well, awesome. I appreciate you. And I know people are going to get a lot out of this recording here, and I'm sure we'll have more questions to boot once we get this out there shortly. Any parting thoughts?
Any parting thoughts? Everyone just breathe. We're going to get through this virus. I promise you.
Yes, we will. Right? And then 6 months, we're going to wonder what happened. Why did all this happen?
Right.
Yeah. And we have to, maintain caution. It's an interesting time we're in, but yeah, fear and worry will not conquer this.
Right.
Yeah.
And just know that everything happens for a reason. Right?
Hey, John, you got any thoughts? Any parting thoughts?
He's like, I'm playing my game, or he's looking up motorcycles. He really wants a motorcycle.
Oh, that's it. Awesome. Me too. I used to ride all the time. All right.
Ride. But maybe like on a, somebody told me I should get a motorcycle at home and put it in the house so he could just sit on it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a cheap tool.
I'll see you soon, John, okay? I'll see you in April.
So, show him with the left hand. Give him a thumbs up. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, so good chatting with y'all. We'll talk soon. And yeah, take care. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Bye.